It seems there's a constant pull between the doing side of life, pursuing accomplishments, achieving goals, getting things done, and the being side, appreciating the moments, recognizing the beauty in the present, soaking in special opportunities. Most of us tend to lean, usually somewhat strongly, either one way or the other. Is it possible to accomplish big things and achieve high-level goals while simultaneously being fully present? And how does the balancing act between the two change throughout the various decades of our lives? Today's guest, Bob Hottman, encompasses that delicate balance. He recently retired, or as he likes to call it, graduated, from an extensive career as CEO of a national accounting firm. He serves on a plethora of company boards and is active with a range of associations and community organizations. Yes, he's one of those people, accomplishing more in a day than most of us do in a month. And yet, I've seen him in multiple settings, and he's legitimately enjoying the moment. Well, maybe he's just a good actor. But it seems that whether he's guiding a high-profile corporate merger or out cycling with friends, he's the same guy. We're going to dig into his mindset and his approach to life in the discussion that follows. Additionally, many of you are considering life transitions right now, whether it's a job change, retirement, or some other aspect of life. And so we're going to also explore the practical elements of this, what we'll call next mountain mindset during our conversation. Thank you for joining us here on the Catalyst 360 podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Brad Cooper, CEO of Catalyst Coaching 360, dad, endurance athlete, grandpa, and this week, the smoker and carver of turkey. Many of you probably know me as Susanna's husband, but either way, we're grateful to have you invest a portion of your week with us. For employers, EAP, and wellness service providers looking to go beyond the check-the-box employee wellness options, we recently announced the trademark 360 Wellbeing Checkup. 2/3 of employees regularly see their dentist, not because there's a problem, to stay on top of things with their teeth and gums. Oddly, almost none of us do the same for our physical and mental health. The 360 Wellbeing Checkup changes that, providing a low-cost, easy-to-integrate option to help enhance the lives of employees everywhere. Details on the website catalystcoaching360.com or reach out anytime. Results at catalystcoaching360.com. We can get some time to talk it through. And if you're an individual considering pursuing certification as a health and wellness coach, our next MBHWC approved training officially kicks off in January, but you can get started now if you'd like. All the details on the Institute site, catalystcoachinginstitute.com. And now it's time to climb the second mountain and master the doing being tightrope with Bob Hottman on the latest episode of the Catalyst 360 podcast. This should be fun. You're one of the most accomplished people I've known in my career, but you seem to be enjoying the journey. Where's the signs of stress? What are the secrets? What are you doing here? What's different that you can do the things that you've done, accomplish the things, dive in the deep end, and yet seem to be enjoying the process?
You know, Brad, I think I've told you before, maybe I'm not smart enough to know why I don't have stress. Right? So that we'll start with that because, you know, when I think back and I look at people that stress, I sometimes wonder what the heck they're stressing about because so often they're stressing over things that they really have no control over. And they're also stressing over things that, quite truthfully, at the end of the day, life will work out if you really understand what's really important to you. And I think most people forget what's really, really important to them. And so they don't really know how to define success. So they're struggling all the time with how to reach that next place in life, if you will.
So that distinction and the model people are familiar with is the sphere of control, sphere of influence, sphere of concern. And you're saying essentially what the research says, focus on what you can control. Stop messing around with all this other stuff.
Yeah, I think that's part of it in that so many people worry about things that they don't have the control on. But I think it's also, they have a hard time. You know, I've gone my entire life, my entire career hearing people talk about things like balance, you know, and they struggle with, and that's where a lot of the stress comes from. They're trying to balance between their work life and their home life and their community life and so forth. And I think that where they really struggle with that is they don't prioritize what's really important to them. And so, you know, I think, you know, I've talked about this before, but, you know, starting with the why, as Simon Sinek would say, you know, why do you do what you do? Why do you want to do what you do? Not what you do and how you do it, but the why, and defining that, and also being able to define what success means to you helps a lot in being able to avoid getting caught in that worrying trap, if you will.
And was that something that you discovered? I've known you for about a decade. Was that something you discovered early in your career? Was it something that there was kind of this light flash, and at 37 you were out on a ride and you just had this? How did that develop? That's not a natural thing.
Well, I don't. It didn't happen on a ride. I can tell you that there was no such thing as a poof. Hey, there it was, right in front of me. I think it was probably more related to just experiencing life in various stages of my life, and what that was. I think to a certain extent, I was this way a little bit. When I was in college and high school and so forth, I was able to prioritize things that were important to me at that point in time. So I wasn't stressing out. And I know that even back then, I can think back to, I was in high school sports, people would like try to figure out what was up with me because I wasn't all, tizzy
amped
about
up.
What yeah. And so I think that it was a little bit there before that, but I do tell you that I think the concept of lifelong learning is critical. One of the things I've done, Brad, is, first of all, I don't think there's anything new in the world that we haven't been taught or that we can't have access to. I think there are different people that present it a different way, and each of us can grasp onto whatever that little thing is. And so I actually made a point of trying to read at least 3 books a year, 3 to 4 books a year that would help me prioritize once again what was there, just kind of reminding me of what's important. Because I find that what would happen, even with me, is I'd get going on something and I forget the big things that really matter. And so by maybe reading somebody else's, listening to a podcast, doing something like that, it would help refocus me back into what was important. And so it was more of a reminder than anything else. And so that lifelong learning, I think it started with kind of a base that I understood, but then taking it to another level throughout my entire career and my entire life to date is part of what it is. And I continue that even after as I've said, graduated, which is another word for retired. I continue to find that I've got to continue to learn what's important to me at all times.
Yeah, that growth is key. We've traded some emails about the doing-being continuum, that delicate balance between pursuing the big things, but appreciating that joy that's there in the moment. Talk us through some of your thoughts with that. What advice would you have for somebody who's struggling? And most people will lean one way or the other. They're either very accomplishment oriented or they're very present and in that moment, but not getting much done. It seems like, from an outsider's perspective, you've found at least some sort of balance between those two. Can you talk us through a little bit of that?
Sure. And first of all, they're not polar opposites. And I think that's probably the most important thing to understand. Some people think you have to be all one way or the other to make it work. And I don't believe that at all. I think I talked a little bit about that balance concept. Yeah. I think this is exactly what it is. You need to be able to balance and define what's really important. And for me, I've always kind of had what was important to me identified, first with faith, second with family, third with friends and community, and then finally my firm or my career, if you will. And so I've had those 4 F's always at the forefront of where I was. And so certain days, certain times, I'd have to focus more on the firm aspect, my career part. Other elements, I'd have to focus more on my faith or my family, if you will, but never at the expense of the other. So I could never be to the point where I never would worry about my career, nor could I ever be at the point where I would never worry about my family, because I think that is what those polar opposites is what creates an issue for people. In that they're not able to identify that place where they feel good, okay, because they're stressed, because they're all on one side and they're worried about the side they're not on, whatever side that is. Yes. And so that's what creates this issue is, in my opinion, is that people are focused on one, but they're worried about the other, as opposed to identifying, understanding where they were at. So let me give you some kind of examples of what I would mean. So for me, one of the things that was important to me is my kids were young, I never missed, unless I was traveling, I never missed an event of my kids. I went to all of their plays, their hockey, their baseball, you name it. I went to all of it. That meant that when I was there, I had to be present with them, not worrying about work. Okay. But when that was over, I'd also then, when they would go to bed at night and so forth, I'd finish up what I had to do at work so that I was able to finish that, recognizing I had to have a balance in there between my family and my career. And so I think wherever you are, I think you have to be present at that point in time. I mean, I think what people really stress in this concept of being successful in your career, they think it has to happen at the total expense of forgetting about your family life, your faith, whatever else is important to you. And it doesn't. You just have to find where that balance occurs. And I think if you focus too far one way or the other, you'll never be as good in either as you could. So for me, it was always trying to understand that I wanted to be successful in my career, but I also wanted to be successful with my family and my faith and my friends and my community. And so just trying to round it all out is I think how I avoided having that stress. But the concept of being present to me is critical, because no matter what you're doing, you have to be focused on what that is and let the other things go for that time being. Doesn't mean don't come back to them. It just means you need to be present at that point in time. You know, I think I shared with you one of the things that we used to do with all of our employees at our firm is I would sit down with them and talk about the things that are important to us from a value perspective, the things that were important to us from a career perspective. I would share with them some of the things that were our purpose as an organization. And I think that purpose, that why, not only as an organization, but also as an individual is critical. If you don't have that, I think you have to figure out what's important. So I would share with them all of those things. And then we would share with them a really fun little read called Fish, which is about the Seattle fish market and what they did. And one of the concepts they had in there was the concept of being present. Okay, when somebody walks into their fish market, they were focused on that person, not the 50 other things that they needed to do that day, but focused on that customer at that point in time. And I think if you take that to all elements of your life, that being present helps, and it helps in a lot of ways, but probably, in my opinion, the most critical thing is it helps build relationships. And at the end of the day, for me at least, what was the most important thing for me is building relationships with, whether it's a relationship in my faith, whether it's a relationship with my family, or it's a relationship with my clients, with relationship with my partners, my colleagues. It was those relationships. And so that common purpose, if you will, is to serve others and build those relationships was critical. And so it was all around a big umbrella, which was that to serve and build relationships. So it didn't matter which part of my life I was focused on.
And is there something about phases of life with this, of there are certain times in a person's career where they are going to be working the 60, 70-hour weeks. There are other times when your kids are just born that you're not sleeping at night and you are just there to get through the next day, and work kind of moves to the side. Is part of that balance struggle? Folks are trying to keep it's like they've created this pie chart and they said, I need 25% for my faith, 25% for my family, 25. Is that part of it at all, you think?
Oh, absolutely. If you want everything to fit into a nice, neat little box, it'll never work. You'll always be unsuccessful in all of them. Okay. Nothing works. Every day is a different balancing act. Okay. And you have to look at it.
I like that.
It's not like, a lifetime, not like a year. It's not like a month. It's every day, every minute. You constantly have to be reevaluating what's important to you and how that's going to work. And it does change. When you're young and single, your life looks very different than when you get married. because all of a sudden now you have another commitment that you have, and you have to build that in. Have kids. Well, that's another commitment that you have to build in. And so each of those stages of life adds a different element to what you want out of life, but more importantly, where you have to focus your time. And so it just means that you just have to do more of a balancing act, but it's not any different. It's just you're able to focus on a few more things than you might have had to before. So it's if people try to put things into a box, they are the most unsuccessful people that I know of.
Interesting.
Because it doesn't work. Life doesn't work that way, and it won't work that way.
Well, and folks, keep in mind, you have an accountant that's saying that. So they know how to put things in boxes, and he's saying, nah, that's not the answer. It's not the answer.
You know, Brad, I'm a trained accountant. I'd probably say I'm probably not the world's best accountant. Okay. We'll just start right there. Okay. I truly believe that's, leading a firm like I did for a number of years, I had some amazing people working with us, and the ones that I saw struggling the most were the ones that tried to put it into a box, where they were like, this is exactly the way it's going to work. And they never felt successful at home. They never felt successful at work because the box was constantly moving and they didn't know how to deal with that. So I think being able to be flexible is critical, but that's where what really matters, but what really matters on a big scale, but what matters right now. Because life changes. Let's face it, we, since I graduated, I'm finding different things that I want to get involved in. And I had a situation where I volunteer for something called Cycling Without Age, which is a really cool, and if anybody wants, they can take a look at that, started by some guy overseas. But there's a chapter here in Colorado that I'm involved in. And we volunteer time to take elderly or people with disabilities on bike rides. Something I really like to do. It encompasses not only my hobbies, but also my passion for serving others and helping others. But things come up. So for instance, my wife is going to have surgery. And so it's like, how's that going to work? And unbeknownst to me, she volunteered me to watch my grandkids when they were going to celebrate their 15th wedding anniversary later this week. Well, now I had a conflict. Okay. I've got a situation where my wife can't watch the kids because she's having surgery. I've got my grandkids and my kids who are celebrating their 15th wedding anniversary. And I made a commitment over here to give a cycling ride for these elderly, and it's like, what the heck do I do? Well, I got to make a call. And I have to call at that point in time, what's most important to me, rather than dwelling on it for days and trying to figure it out. I just made the call and said, look, I'm sorry, I've got to babysit my grandkids because that's where my priority is today. 10 years ago, I didn't have grandkids, so that wouldn't have been a priority. So life does change, and it changes how you focus, and you have to identify what that is. And do I feel bad that I couldn't help with the elderly? A little bit, but quite truthfully, I made sure that they had me covered at the same time so they had somebody else to do it. So I found a solution so that I didn't have to worry that I wasn't filling my commitment on one side.
But it's that clarity that provided the solution. It wasn't the mental gymnastics in the moment. The clarity had been established over years. And so when the conflict came, it really wasn't a conversation internally. It was just, I need to make the call.
Right. And that's where most people struggle, I think, because they won't make the call. They
or they don't have the clarity to start with.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
That's probably true. The clarity is the critical thing. So if you identify what's really important at that point in time, it's much easier.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. We talk a lot about once you create stop the goals, like stop making goals the thing. Once you create the vision of the person you're becoming, the goals, it's nice to write them down, but they kind of accomplish themselves when the vision is that clear. And that's really what you're describing there is you have your vision of who you are as a person. Then you just live it out.
Yeah, no question. And so I don't know if that'll help people reduce the amount of stress or not. It works for me.
Well, I want to come back because you said being flexible is key. And so my dad's an accountant, not practicing anymore, but I grew up in that life. Accountants have a reputation. You like structure. You like things to fit in those boxes. You like everything to add up at the end of the column. You're running a very large, impactful firm made up primarily of individuals with at least that reputation. How do you counsel? How do you mentor the person who's saying it's not adding up, and they're not talking about the numbers, they're talking about their life? What advice do you have for somebody? Because a large part of the population, they like that structure. They like those boxes. So how do you extend your flexibility advice to the individual whose temperament, personality, background, history, whatever, kind of like to have them fit in boxes?
Well, it's an interesting question. I don't know that I have the complete answer to it, but it also goes a little bit back to what we talked about before, and that is the big question, the why. Okay, and so flexibility is you're able to accomplish that when you understand what it is you really want. I don't think most people, I think they feel comfortable with things in boxes, but I don't think that's why they do things. Okay, I think it's just comfort because they feel they have control over it. Okay, I mean, if you think about, one of my old sayings, Brad, is that I don't like rules because they put you in a box. I like guidelines. Okay, guidelines allow you to work within the gray area. I mean, there's right and wrong, and we all need to know right and wrong, but there's also gray. Yep. And I think that if people struggle with black and white all the time, they're going to have an internal conflict in everything they do. Whereas if they understand,
and when you say struggle with black and white, you mean that they're trying to put every single thing in life either into black or white?
Correct. Okay. Or into structure or non-structure.
Got it. Debit and credit.
So it's really, there's your accountant.
Boom.
Wow. I tell you, man. Listeners, listen to the doctor, talk like an accountant. So it really is when people try to put things into extremes, black or white, and certain things have to be in black and white because there is a right or wrong to so many things. But at the same time, there's so many other areas where you don't have to be one or the other. You can be in between. And that's where the flexibility occurs. It doesn't occur on, core value kinds of things. Those are black and white.
Right.
Okay. Those are very black and white. But how and when things get done have the flexibility, not the why. The whys pretty much are black and white when it's out there. But the focus on how and when things have to get done, quite truthfully, have flexibility all over the place. If you have something that needs to be done, in a week, doesn't mean you have to do it today. It means you might be able to do it tomorrow. There's flexibility in that. Okay. Some people may call that procrastination, but what you're going to find is that not trying to put everything into it must be looking exactly the same way, I think is critical. I can tell you that I did have a firm of accountants, and I'll basically stand up for the entire profession right now and say it's not a bunch of individuals where everything is focused on, putting things in structure and boxes, because every day of your life is a different day. Okay. It's not like you sit at a desk and your world doesn't change. You're meeting with different people every day, every hour, whether it's clients or whether it's people you're trying to develop within an organization, you're constantly moving. And so you have to have that flexibility in there. There are rules in what we do, and those are the boxes that we have to fit into, but how we do it, it can be very, very different. So even as an accountant, you have to have massive amounts of flexibility. And quite truthfully, I think sometimes people use that structure thing as an excuse to not wanting to be flexible.
Interesting.
Okay.
I like that. Yeah. So. All right. 57 years of life for me. I've spent time around executives in pretty much every industry. Almost always, they push all of the execs, especially push all of their life chips in on the money and power game. So some of the things we've talked about, relationships, health and fitness, it's just kind of out there. you seem different. You've had the professional success. We've been out on rides together. You've made fitness a natural part of life. I remember our first ride together. I'm like, yeah, no problem. This guy's working 1 billion hours. I'll just go kick his butt. And I'm huffing and puffing halfway through that ride. So you made fitness a priority. You love being a dad. You love being a grandfather. You actually smile most of the time. What a weirdo. Like, what's the story? And I don't know. I know you don't know the answer to this, but why do you think so many high-level executives are missing that side of life?
I think it's because, I'm a very simple person. Okay. I like to break things down into the simplest point and what's critical. And I'm not here to tell any of your listeners it's not important to have and try to make a successful career financially. But if your whole life is that, you're going to be missing out on 99% of the things that might matter to you more. Okay. So again, it's kind of that balance. Okay. If I put in more hours in the office, if I had done certain things, would I have more money? Sure. Would I be happier? No. And so if you do your scorecard based on dollars and cents, that's what you will get is dollars and cents. And then you'll sit back and wonder why you don't have a successful marriage. You'll wonder why you don't have a successful family. You wonder why your friends are very, very focused on just one thing, and that's, the dollars with you. Whereas if you are able to balance, the financial aspects of your life, which are there and they're important, but if that's the most important thing to you, that's all you're going to have. And so for me, it was never about money. I mean, I can tell you in my entire career, I never once focused on dollars, not once. It was never going to be, because I knew that if certain things would go certain ways, I'd be successful enough that I'll be able to take care of my family and myself and those that I want to be able to take care of. So it wasn't a focus of, doesn't mean I ignored what I was doing, but I didn't make it my only focus. The things that mattered to me, if you remember my 3 F's or 4 F's, if you will, faith, family, friends, then my firm. And nowhere in there was a focus on finance. Myself. Because if it was a focus on me, and I think this is where people who focus on dollars, it becomes a focus on them. And for me, if you focus on the needs of others, I'm a huge believer in servant leadership. I'm a huge believer that the most satisfaction you'll get as a human being is when you provide service to others, not yourself, but to others. And by doing that, I mean, some of the most fulfilled people I have ever met in my entire life, were just making enough money to get by, but they were happy. And some of the most miserable people I've ever met in my entire life were those that were sitting on hundreds, if not billions of dollars. Okay. And so if money is the key to success and key to happiness, I wonder why that is. Because more people can be tainted by money than almost anything else. And so for those individuals that focused on finances as an executive, I think that's great for them, but it was never what was for me. I would never judge somebody for their focus on life. But for me, my focus was never on the dollars. It was basically on that concept of serving others. Okay. And when I did that, I felt good. And when I felt good, that's success. To me, that's a win. Okay. And if I made some shekels along the way and I can put them in the bank, even better. Okay. But it wasn't focused on the dollar aspect to life.
Do you think part of it is that control piece you talked about earlier? I've noticed on a personal level, that's the draw for me of endurance sports, because endurance sports is pretty much whatever you put in, you get out of it, which may not be true in a relationship. It may not be true in parenting. It may not be true in finding new clients. There was an auto payoff. And I think a lot of people in those roles probably see, look, I can work on this thing over here and probably fall on my face, or I can just work more and I know that will produce X. Do you think that's part of it, the control piece?
Probably is somewhat of a control piece. So you take an endurance athlete, okay, and I was never an endurance athlete. I was always good enough to be okay in everything that I did. And so maybe just being an okay person is a nice thing because you're able to
let it go.
Let it go. Okay. But there are certain things in life that matter to me a ton. Okay. And I've mentioned what those were before, but I also recognize that in life, you also have to be able to do things like take care of yourself. I mean, I never wanted to be a professional athlete, not that I could ever be it, but it wasn't a focus of mine. Okay. I wanted to stay in shape. So I had certain things that I do, whether it's cycling or skiing or whatever else there may be, I would do those things. Okay. But I wouldn't do them at the extreme of what else mattered. Okay. For me. Now, if my career was being a performance athlete, you are going to make a choice.
Sure.
Okay. And that choice is going to be on that performance. But and I honestly don't really know, other than you, of course, Brad, who's a tremendous athlete.
Remember the story about you kicking my butt?
yeah. Or the time that I knocked you over on a bike, but we won't go there. If your goal is to get to the Olympics, you're going to have to focus on certain things, but think of the emptiness that happens. And you see this in athletes too. Once you reach the top of your mountain
all the time,
then what? Yeah. Okay. And it's because they only had a single focus in life.
Right.
And so I think having only a single focus, whether it's finances or whether it's winning that gold or whatever it is, and there's nothing else, once you reach that mountain and you're there, you don't have another place to go. That's when you can have that letdown. And so you always have to have more than one mountain you're looking at, no matter what it is. They may be different peaks, but they need to be there if you're going to have that balance that you need to be successful.
Wow. Stress. Everybody's talking about it. I've asked you in the past over coffee that, man, you don't seem to let things get to you, even with all the things that I know you've got on your shoulders. You've talked about some tips just in the in-betweens with this. Anything that comes to mind specifically around stress that has been helpful to you beyond what you've already shared with the focus on the core elements, letting things go that don't fit those four? Are there other things that come to mind at all?
Well, one of the characteristics that I see that people have a lot of stress is they also don't get any sleep.
Amen.
They wake up in the middle of the night. They're concerned over what's going to happen tomorrow. You can ask almost anybody that knows me that when my head hits the pillow, I'm done. And nothing happens till I wake up the next morning, and that's it. Okay. So, certain things build off of themselves. I don't know if the sleep creates the stress issue or the stress creates the sleep issue or what, but I do tell you that there's a relationship to being able to feel that you've done what you can for that day and move on. So I can tell you, so for me, the first thing when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I do is I say a little prayer, and then I talk in my head about what I need to accomplish that day. And I just prioritize what's going to happen, no matter what my calendar said, no matter what I thought I was going to do. I would sit there and I'd say, okay, these are the things I'm going to focus on today. And I keep the list pretty simple because things will come up, but keep the list pretty simple so I can feel at the end of the day I accomplished what I said I was going to, whatever that is. Okay, whether it's from a work perspective, whether it's from a family perspective, whether it's from a exercise perspective, I identify the things that I'm going to focus on that day. And then as long as I get those 2 or 3 or 4 things done, not many more than that, those are the things. And then everything else is just kind of filler. I have to be that flexibility for in there. And so, that's a tip that I would tell people is don't try to overcomplicate your life on any particular day. Keep it as simple as you can so that you're not doing that. And this is coming from a guy whose calendar was scheduled.
Overwhelmingly. Yes.
It was scheduled 10 hours a day, every half hour
100%.
With things going on. Right. But even with that, there was a handful of things that mattered. And those were going to take the priority at the end of the day.
So let me come back to that, because make sure that I'm understanding it and our listeners are, because I think this could be powerful. So you got your 10 hours, your 16 meetings, your 18 things on your list, but in the midst of that, you look at them and you say, these are the three or whatever.
Yep.
And if those three are done well at the end of the day, it's been a good day. I've accomplished what I've needed to, even if these other 12 need to be pushed back in the schedule somewhere.
That's correct.
Okay.
Because it's that whole prioritization of what matters. Okay. And that list doesn't have to just mean, things at work. It can mean things at home also, right. Or it can mean things for yourself. Just identifying what those things are for today. And this kind of goes along with being present. And that is that if I focus on those things and they are successful and I get those done, I was present for those. And that's what mattered.
We've joked a little bit about your phrasing of retirement as graduation. I'm sure there's something behind that wordsmithing. Of all the people I've talked to, I don't think I've heard that phrase, although it makes perfect sense. And then follow up to that, how do you approach that, starting the day with prayer and priorities in that graduation when you don't have 10 hours scheduled and 18 meetings and 1,000 to-dos? How is that going? Because this is a relatively recent transition for you in the last, 3 years or so. So first of all, wordsmithing, and then how's that whole process working with the priorities now?
Sure. So I've always believed, and I've always encouraged others to believe, that when you're, quote, retiring, that if you're retiring away from something, you'll never be successfl Okay? And so many people go through life waiting to retire, and they work the long hours, they get through it, and then all of a sudden they are, quote, retired, and then it's now what? Okay, they only had the focus on getting there, not what necessarily what are they going to be going to. And so for me, because it's not retirement away from my work career, it's a graduation to my next stage in life.
I love that. Okay?
It's just like you go from high school to college, college to work, you do these graduations through your life. This is no different than any one of those. It's just the next stage of my life. And so for me, it was then focusing on the things that I wanted to focus in on at that stage in my life. And so I prioritized what was really going to be important. Okay. And I've got my physical activities, which I added a few more because I wanted to try a few more things in life. I added a couple of other personal things that I wanted to focus on. I continued with the volunteer charity things that I wanted to do, and I added some. And then I have some prior organizations where I have a huge respect for the organizations. They've asked me to sit on their boards, and I've agreed to do that. Not because I wanted something to do. It's just I like the people. Okay, and so I mentioned this concept of relationships. Now, in this stage of my life and graduations, I get to focus on the relationships I really want to focus on. And so, first of all, number one is if something's scheduled and on my life and something comes up as it relates to my grandkids or my wife, that's number one. It doesn't matter. Everything else everything else I can put to the bottom. And so I know that that's my priority, because I know that my time with them is going to be much more limited than it was with my kids and my friends and other things. So that becomes my highest priority, those things, my spouse and my grandkids. And so this concept of graduation is graduating to something new. Okay.
I love it.
And it's not the end. I mean, and until I'm on the other side of the grass looking up, there's going to continue to be graduations that I go through. This just happens to be the one I have. And then how do I deal with this? I start the day the same. Okay. I woke up this morning and I said, oh my gosh, I got to do this podcast thing. What the heck is Brad going to ask me? Because we never really talked a lot about what you're going to ask me. And I'm thinking, okay, well, this will be fun.
Blank slate, baby.
I'll just have to trust that something will come out of my mouth that doesn't sound too stupid. Like I say, too stupid. It'll still be stupid, just not too stupid. So, I had that, sitting in there. I have, a ride later scheduled that I'm going to be going on. And the next thing I found out that my wife wants to go up to our place in Winter Park and spend a little time before she has her surgery tomorrow. So it just became the big things. I know the 3 big things were for that day. And I'm sure that the rest of the day will fill up. When you quote graduate, one of the things you find out, just like you do in life, is that you wake up with nothing on your calendar and you go to bed and only half done. And because your life will fill up. Okay. And so I know what the big 3 things I'm going to do today, and everything else is just going to happen. Okay.
Love it. I love it. Okay. So I think we've chatted a little bit about David Brooks' book, The Second Mountain. Tips for those who may be facing some transition in life. And it may not be this graduation that you've recently gone through. It may be a job change. It may be a relationship change. It may be an unexpected illness where they're now transitioning into pursuing that. But just anything that pops into mind that has been helpful for you as you've approached that transition and moved through that transition.
Well, let me ask this, Brad, because you'd mentioned that's your new favorite book that you're reading or something, Second Mountain, and I have not read it. You mentioned it just before we went out of town, and I had some just regular novels that I wanted to read because I haven't done that for a long time. So I was going to read a couple of books there. What are the 3 or 4 things that you pulled out of Second Mountain? Let me ask you that.
Yeah, I think the biggest one is mimicking much of what you've talked about of the continued growth. We're not done. We're not escaping. I love how you said that. If you're retiring away from something, you won't be successful. I think that is such a key phrase. And he really goes into that. And then he lays out, I believe David is in his mid-50s as well. So he's not there ready for that yet, but he's pondering, and he ponders it with us. And I think the other piece of that book was it's a commonality. It's not unique to you or me or him. We all go through these transitions. We had Bruce Feiler on, 3 years ago, who wrote Life is in the Transitions was the name of his book. And I love that concept that it's not, what was the other book I recently read? She really focused on the phrase in the meantime. And I'd never thought about that before. I say in the meantime all the time. But what I mean when I say in the meantime is in the meaningless time, in the wasted time, I'll go ahead and do this. And her point in that book, I'm thinking it's something to do with time. But anyway, what she's talking about in that book is in the meantime. Like that's where the magic is. That's where the great things happen is in the meantime. That was Bruce Feiler's concept of life is in the transitions. It's not after the transition. It's not before the transition. And I think you're mimicking some of that as well. So those are some of the things that popped into my head.
Yeah. So this concept of the second mountain. Okay. So you've climbed your first mountain. I mean, it goes a little bit with that, what do you do with the second half of your life, if you will? Right. And what does that look like? And people do go through stages of life. I had mentioned, you're young, you're single, you get married, you have kids, your kids go away, you're empty nesters. You see so many families break up when the empty nesters because they really didn't have a connection.
There's no, yeah.
Before that, you see these whole things, and then you graduate, and so all of these things in life, and in each of those, you'll have slightly different priorities. Okay, and so you could look at each of those as another mountain. If you look at it that way, I look at it slightly different. Okay, and I look at it as maybe one mountain with little ledges in it. Okay, because you're first building your family, and that's a ledge, and then your families of kids are going to school, college, and so forth, and there's another ledge there. But you're still focused on that ultimate mountain, whatever it is. And I'd mentioned this to you before, and for me, my ultimate mountain, okay, is this concept of, so what's on the peak of my mountain is serving. Okay. I want to serve people and I want to build relationships. I want to build a relationship with my faith. I want to build a relationship with my wife. I want to build a relationship with my family. I want to build a relationship with my clients. I want to build a relationship with friends. It's all about building relationships, but doing so in serving them. So for me, it was never, I really tried not that I was perfect in any sense of imagination, but try not to focus on me, okay, other than my health and fitness, but try to focus on helping others, because that's where my most satisfaction would come from. So for me, it's continually building a mountain, going up the same mountain, but doing so in stages. Okay, so I'm getting to base camp, okay, and then I'm getting up the mountain further, and then, but I never will reach the mountain, the top of the mountain. Okay, and I'm okay with that. Okay.
And that's probably good.
Yeah. Because, there's that old saying, life's a journey. Okay. When my wife and I used to scuba dive a lot, she'd be in a hurry to get to where we were going, as opposed to just stopping and enjoying the moment where you're at. It's that life's a destination. Okay. It's a journey, not a destination. So understand that we're all on a journey. Where are we in that stage of the journey? And quite truthfully, I don't think I'll ever reach the ultimate destination. It's just a long, long journey, and I'm just going to enjoy each stage of what it is, and the prioritization of each of those stages will change, but never it'll always be under that umbrella of serving and under the umbrella of trying to build relationships.
Well, and I like that analogy of the stages up the same mountain, because what popped into my mind was the compounding interest element. It's not that you finish the mountain, you start over, you throw everything out that you had before. Your second mountain is dependent upon how you've monitored your fitness and your health in the first mountain. It's dependent upon the relationships you've built in the first whatever phase of life. It's dependent on the way you've treated your finances during that first phase of life. So it's truly not starting over. It's as you describe, it's going that next level and having some benefits of the compounding interest you've built in your life, not just your finances, for that first 30, 40, 50 years. And that's applicable to any life transition.
Yeah. So, just think of it from an educational perspective. When you get out of, elementary school and you go on to middle school, you don't forget what you learned in elementary school. You're learning something new. You go to high school, you learn something new. Go to college, you go in your work life. Okay. You're constantly building off of stuff. And so to me, that's just an educational venue of life, but life's much more than that. So if you do the same thing, so it is, I don't think I ever start a second mountain. Yeah. I think I'm always on the mountain but I'm only getting to a certain stage.
I love it. Love it. Just a couple more. This is so good. What were some of the challenges you faced while you were transitioning from that, frankly, you wouldn't say it this way, but everybody else would, a high-powered corporate role to a new but still as people can hear, very purpose-driven life? What were some of those struggles? What were some of the unexpected hiccups or speed bumps that you were prepared, you were ready, it was time, and yet this happened that you didn't expect to see or experience or feel?
Well, as I told you before, the things I missed most about my leaving my business world into my new life, one was losing my assistant, Jen, because she helped manage my life, which was awesome. And the other was technology support. And so those two things I missed. Okay. But what I can tell you, I didn't lose to the transition was my relationships. I still see those people that I want to see, that were my partners, that were my clients. I still see them. Okay. Even though we don't have the same, working relationship, I still see them. I still see my friends. And so it wasn't a function of losing what I had. It's what I still maintain through there, which was, and that was unknown to me how that was going to work, but it worked exactly the way I would hope it would. It's just continues on and it never changes. Okay. So it just continues to grow. So that part of it is very, very good. What probably the biggest thing that changed for me is that I have complete control, 100% control over my calendar now, which I didn't before. Okay. I had my priorities. My assistant Jen knew what those priorities were, so she was able to make sure. But I no longer have things just that are back to back to back. So I have more freedom that I can sit and think. Okay, which actually is wonderful. So what I can tell you is I didn't have any negatives. Okay, other than I had to work with my wife a lot more on my calendar, because before she knew I was going to be working. Now I got to make sure that we know what's going on, because we'll plan things, that we need to do together that we weren't necessarily doing before. So a lot more communication with my spouse on calendar things that I never would have thought of before. That was the one thing that changed. But fortunately, I didn't have any downfalls on my side because I knew where I was going. I knew what I wanted to do. I was going to do it. I mean, it wasn't like I was, running from something. I was just going to something else. And so I didn't have that. People, I think there's a mindset too, that people think that when they go into that stage, they're going to miss these things. It was the right time for me to do what I'm going to do. I'll give you an analogy. Okay. So, you have kids, I have kids, and at some point in your life, it's time for your kids to leave the house and move on. Okay. And there's a lot of people that struggle with that. They really struggle with that concept because their kids are gone. What are they going to do with their lives? Their whole life was only focused around that one thing for them, and they become empty.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whereas if they realized and had other things, not that wasn't important, but that wasn't the only thing, they wouldn't be as disappointed, number one. And number two, they'd also realize it's time for their kids to have their lives just like they had their own life. Okay. And so it's kind of like feeling like, what's the word I'm looking for? They felt satisfaction that they were able to raise a child who could live and be on their own.
Yes.
As opposed to somebody leaving, it's a success. And so when I left and graduated, retired from the firm, I looked at it and said, I feel very good in that I'm leaving an organization that I feel is going to be very successful, much more successful than even when I was there. And so it's kind of like your child. It's grown up and it's ready to go on its own. So that's how I left the firm. That's how I look at it. And so I didn't feel that there was any need for me to feel like I was losing something in this transition.
It's a fantastic perspective that could be applied so many different ways. Did you miss the pace? Because as you described, 10 hours plus of meetings and calls and things that you're involved with to, well, I think I'll go up in the mountains today. That's a big shift. Or did you incrementally do that where you were slowly winding it down so you didn't go from 85 miles an hour to 35? You kind of went 85, 75, 65.
Yeah. I actually, there's maybe one benefit of COVID that that I was the benefactor for that others might not have been. COVID was a year and a half, 2 year period where life changed. And that was right during that
transition.
My transitional period was right there in there. So I actually experienced that where life changed overnight with COVID. And so I benefited from that. So I didn't have that start going off. Yeah.
Okay.
So it was a transition that way. Okay. That said, but I will also tell you that our firm was pretty good in that the last year of your career, we're very adamant that you need to change what you're doing during that. And so many of your responsibilities go away anyhow. Okay. So that you can start focusing on other things. So the firm was good about that, but COVID was truly, I never want to say there's anything good about COVID, but that was a good thing for me. Yeah.
Right. And would that be your recommendation to someone who's facing a child leaving the house, moving out, going on to their life, or the graduation into retirement, or whatever it might be, whatever that transition is? Would it be, it's coming? Sometimes you don't know it's coming, health issues, but usually in the big ones, we know it's coming. Would your recommendation be, look, 18 months out, start developing the broader, what do you think?
Yes, my recommendation is that I wouldn't do it 18 months out. I'd do it 5, 10 years out. I mean, I think you should be way ahead of there. Part of life. Yeah. It's part of life. And so you can't wait till that last year and a half to be thinking about this. No matter what stage you're in, you need to be thinking about it way before that, and understanding that you need to have other things that you're focusing on. So yeah, I think you do that. That's why you're going to something, not away from something. And so you're not losing your kids. You're going to the next stage of your life. You're not leaving your office, your firm, your career. You're going to something else. And so, and you can't come up with that in the last minute. You have to come up with it way before that. Yeah.
Bob, one last question, but thank you for doing this. I know you were like, I'm not like a famous author or anything. This has been so valuable, so many nuggets. With that, any just final words of wisdom, stuff that you kind of pondered over the last week as you knew this was coming, that you said, yeah, I want to remember to mention this. Anything else you would throw out there for folks going through that transition or similar transitions, or on the doing side of life, and what you might recommend there?
The only thing that I would recommend for most people is that you figure out what that why is and how you define success, and understand that you're, if it truly is the purpose for you, you'll feel good about what it is. Okay. And so find that thing that really matters and go toward it, whatever it is.
This was a unique interview for me. I've known Bob for several years, and so I've really had the chance to see him in all those different settings, and I really appreciate his authentic transparency about the journey. Quick reminder for employers, benefit consultants, and complementary wellness providers. It's now easy to integrate personalized, board-certified behavioral, physical, and mental well-being coaching into any program or platform, or simply offer it as a valuable standalone benefit, especially with our new trademark 360 Wellbeing Checkout. Please reach out to discuss details, results at catalystcoaching360.com, or you can visit the website catalystcoaching360.com anytime. And now it's time to be a catalyst. This is Catalyst Coaching 360, Dr. Brad Cooper. Make it a great rest of your week, and I'll speak with you soon on the next episode of the Catalyst 360 podcast, or maybe over on the YouTube coaching channel.